I am worried, and I know that there are more acute and urgent things to worry about. Bread and butter issues, pocketbook issues, the tariffs, the cost of living, of course. But I'm also deeply worried about the state of freedom of speech in Canada, but not just in Canada, around the world. I just saw a news story out of the United Kingdom by the Times of London, perhaps the most reputable broadsheet in that city, that on average, the United Kingdom arrests 30 people every day for saying something on social media. 30 people a day. I don't even think that Vladimir Putin's Russia keeps up that pace, and they're twice as large. Joining us now to talk about this very issue is the author of a new article in the National Post called "Free Speech is Backsliding Across Europe. It Must Be an Election Issue Here." I'm talking about Christine Van Geyn. She's the Litigation Director at the Canadian Constitution Foundation and the author of a new book called "Free Speech in Canada." What a pleasure to have Christine back on the show. Good to see you again. Boy, you're in the fight. So give me an update on what the CCF, that's different from the JCCF we sometimes talk to. Tell me about the CCF, the Canadian Constitution Foundation, and what you guys are doing to fight for free speech.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Ezra. The Canadian Constitution Foundation is a nonpartisan legal charity. We're a national charity. We have done a lot of public interest litigation on the issue of free speech and on broadly issues of constitutional law and fundamental freedoms in Canada. Some of your viewers might know us because we're one of the organizations that brought the legal challenge to Justin Trudeau's invocation of the Emergencies Act against the 2022 Freedom Convoy. That was when he used that piece of legislation, it shut down protests that were nonviolent and largely peaceful, although highly disruptive. That is in its core, an act of censorship. We also have been challenging what are referred to as bubble zone laws across Canada. These are laws that prohibit protests in specific areas. So I just got back from Calgary recently where we were challenging a bubble zone law in that city that prohibits not just protests near libraries and recreation centers and community centers. Generally, it prohibits them on the basis of the content of the protest.
Right.
So this is a law that says you can protest, the climate extinction, or you can have a labor strike in front of a library, but you cannot protest something like drag story hour. The law would actually also probably prohibit protests about foreign conflicts, about supervised injection sites, and all kinds of things that are on this government prohibited list of topics to protest. And once the government's deciding what you can and cannot protest, you don't have a right to protest at all.
That's a great point. It's a content-based restriction. Can I ask, because we helped crowdfund for a pastor named Derek Reimer, who was kicked out of a drag queen story hour he was protesting. It sounds like it's the same law that you're challenging. Is that right?
It is. I believe it's the same law, but it's a separate lawsuit. So there is a case that's still proceeding at the Court of Appeal now called Heather and Calgary. That involves a man named Larry Heather, who was also charged under this same law. Ours was a judicial review. So it actually would be a broader precedent if it was decided as a judicial review, but only part of the judicial review proceeded, and we will likely be intervening in Mr. Heather's appeal. So lots of moving parts, lots of technical litigation stuff I don't want to bore your viewers with, but at its core, these are laws that prohibit the ability of regular citizens to protest the action of their government, which is fundamental to democracy.
Right. Wow. Thank you. I think I understand the detail you referred to. There's a lot of different ways you can fight a different law, but challenging its constitutionality is perhaps the most important. Let me get back to your article in the National Post. I look at Europe and I think that free speech is in retreat in just about every country there. I really can't think of one where it's getting stronger. I think the UK is appalling. I have I have some skin in the game there. I'm friends with Tommy Robinson, who is a journalist activist who's serving 18 months in prison. He'll be let out in 9, but 9 months is solitary for violating a don't publish order on one of his videos. I find that astonishing. I see in Ireland and Scotland, they're either bringing in or have brought in their version of the Online Harms Act. France. I think they actually were banning Rumble, the whole platform. Anyway, I won't go on, but I really see free speech is in retreat across Europe. I think it was retreating in America too. Maybe it's coming back a bit. What's your analysis of the state of freedom in the world?
So I actually don't agree that free speech is in a good situation in the United States either. I think it's actually backsliding everywhere. The reason I say it's not great in America is the recent decisions by the Trump administration to issue these executive orders targeting some law firms. I also don't agree with some of the action on some of the deportations of college students on the basis of the content of their speech alone. Now, there are some details that we don't have, but Ezra, I think your viewers might be familiar with one particular case of a student from Colombia who has a green card. It seems like there's a lot going on in his particular case. His name's Mahmoud. And if he's being deported as a green card holder on the content of his speech alone, that would be a violation of America's very strong protections for freedom of expression. Now, I'm not defending the content of his speech. I think the content of Mahmoud Khalil's speech is actually abhorrent and disgusting. But that's how you know someone is a real defender of freedom of expression, if they're willing to defend the right of someone to express speech that they disagree with. So I think that free speech is backsliding across the world, and we're sort of at this inflection point globally where I think Canada has a decision to make. Are we going to be a country that is a beacon, an example to the world of protections of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, or are we going to be yet another cautionary tale to the world? Yeah. I would like to become an example of how allowing for robust debate about all kinds of different issues, including issues that we might disagree on, allows for the flourishing of society, that we allow for freedom of expression. I'd like to have a government that keeps that really precious, vital right that has been core to Western democracies for so long, that protects that instead of backslides like the rest of the world has. And I think that that's something that Canadians should think about when they vote for their next government.
I hear what you're saying about Mahmoud Khalil. I guess the one asterisk I'd put there, and I hear what you're saying, but I think if you're a foreigner who's in Canada or the United States as a guest, a privilege, not a right. So you're not a citizen. You weren't born here. You haven't naturalized here. You came here under a specific invitation. You're allowed to come and study at our university. You're allowed to be a temporary foreign worker. And instead, you go to these Hamas hate marches. And in the case of Khalil, I think there's some information that perhaps he
what I'd say about Khalil's case is that there's things that are still unknown. If he lied on his application to obtain that green card, totally different story. I think it also depends on exactly what his activities were. Right. It does seem like he was distributing Hamas propaganda. I think the question is, what is the actual rationale for the deportation? And based on reporting from the Free Press, what the Free Press, Barry Weiss's outlet, has said is that it seems to be on the content of the speech alone. If that's the only reason, that's not acceptable for a green card holder. For someone with different immigration status, perhaps a different result. For a green card holder, if it's just the content, not good enough. But there might be more to the case that we don't know yet. As I said, disagree with his speech.
Right.